Victorian England, 1873. The rain fell in heavy sheets outside the window of Lord Sinclair's study, where Lady Charlotte Sinclair stood frozen, her fingers clutching the letter that had arrived that morning. Her father, gone. A riding accident in the countryside had claimed his life instantly, leaving her alone in a world that offered little mercy to young women without protection. "You understand your position now, I presume." Uncle Edmund's voice sliced through her grief. He had arrived within hours of the news. His thin lips curled into what she supposed was meant to be sympathy, but resembled something far more predatory. Charlotte raised her chin. At 21, she was no longer a child, though the law treated her as such. "I understand my father has passed, Uncle. I hardly think discussing my position is appropriate at this moment." Edmund Sinclair's eyes narrowed. "Sentiment is a luxury you cannot afford, Charlotte. Your father's debts have left Rosewood practically insolvent. As your guardian, I have arranged a suitable match." "A match?" The words felt like ice in her veins. "Lord Barnaby has expressed interest. He's willing to overlook the financial situation." Charlotte paled. Lord Barnaby was nearly 60, with a reputation that made even the most hardened society matrons shudder. 3 wives already in the ground, each one younger than the last. "I will not marry Lord Barnaby," she said, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. Her uncle's hand came down hard on the desk. "You have no choice. The banns will be read next Sunday." That night, Charlotte's lady's maid, Lily, found her staring sightlessly out the window. "There's talk, miss," Lily whispered, her eyes darting to the door. "The Duke of Greymont is seeking a wife. A practical arrangement, they say." "Alexander Hartley?" Charlotte frowned. The name conjured images of a remote figure, seldom seen in society since the mysterious death of his young wife 5 years prior. "What does that matter to me? He's powerful enough to stand against your uncle, miss. And they say he wants no love, no expectations, just a proper duchess to manage his household while he attends to his business affairs. A marriage in name only." Charlotte turned from the window. Hope, dangerous and fragile, flickered to life. 2 days later, Charlotte sat in the austere drawing-room of Hartley House in London, her back straight as a poker, as she faced the Duke of Greymont. Alexander Hartley was not what she had expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across his forehead in an unruly manner that suggested he cared little for fashion. But it was his eyes that arrested her, deep blue, like the sea before a storm, and utterly, completely empty. "You understand what I'm offering, Lady Charlotte?" His voice was deep, cool, like water running over stone. "A business arrangement," she replied. "Protection from my uncle's schemes in exchange for my fulfilling the role of Duchess." Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps at her directness. "I have no interest in romance," he continued. "My first marriage cured me of such notions. What I need is a capable woman to manage my household and occasionally appear at my side for necessary social functions. And in return, you will have financial security, freedom to pursue your own interests within reason, and my name as protection." He paused. "We would, of course, maintain separate quarters." Charlotte studied him. This cold, remote man was offering her escape. Not love, not passion, but safety. After the terror of Uncle Edmund's plans, it felt like salvation. "I accept, Your Grace." The wedding was a quiet affair at St. George's, Hanover Square, with only a handful of witnesses. Charlotte wore pale blue rather than white, a practical gown that would serve her after the ceremony. The Duke barely looked at her as they exchanged vows, his expression as remote as a mountain peak. As they left the church, Edmund Sinclair stood watching from across the street, his face mottled with rage. The Duke's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on Charlotte's elbow, guiding her into the waiting carriage. "He cannot touch you now," Alexander said quietly as the carriage pulled away. "You are a Hartley, and under my protection." Charlotte looked at her new husband's profile, sharp against the afternoon light. "Thank you, Your Grace." He turned to her then, those storm-blue eyes assessing. "Alexander, in private at least, we should use our given names." "Alexander," she repeated, testing the sound of it on her tongue. They arrived at Hartley House as dusk fell. The staff lined up to greet their new Duchess, faces curious but polite. The housekeeper, Mrs. Wilson, curtsied deeply. "Welcome, Your Grace. Your rooms have been prepared." Charlotte nodded, feeling the weight of her new title settling on her shoulders like an unfamiliar cloak. "There will be a small dinner in an hour," Alexander said. "For appearance's sake, we should dine together on your first night as Duchess." Their first meal as husband and wife was a silent affair, broken only by the clink of silver against fine china. Charlotte found herself stealing glances at this man she had married, this stranger who held her fate in his hands. In the candlelight, his features seemed less severe, the shadows softening the hard line of his jaw. "You'll leave for Greymont Manor tomorrow," he said abruptly. Charlotte set down her fork. "I had thought we would remain in London. I have business in the city that requires my attention. Greymont is more suitable for you to settle in and learn your duties as Duchess." "I see." She didn't. Not really. Was he already banishing her to the countryside? "And when will you join me there?" Something like discomfort passed across his face. "When my business allows." Later, as Lily helped her prepare for bed in her new chambers, spacious, elegantly appointed and notably separate from the Duke's, Charlotte wondered if she had simply exchanged one prison for another, albeit a gilded one. "He's not what I expected," she confessed. "The servants say he wasn't always so cold," Lily offered, brushing out Charlotte's long chestnut hair. "Before the first Duchess died, he was different." "How did she die?" Charlotte asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since Lily first mentioned the Duke of Greymont. Lily's hands stilled. "They say she fell from the cliffs near Greymont Manor. An accident, officially. And unofficially? People talk, Your Grace. Some say she was unhappy. Others—" Lily bit her lip. "Others what?" "Others whisper that the Duke was seen coming back from the cliffs alone that night, his clothes soaked through." Charlotte felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. What manner of man had she married? The following morning, Alexander escorted her to the carriage that would take her to Greymont Manor. As the footman helped her in, Alexander suddenly reached for her hand, an unexpected gesture that made Charlotte's heart stutter. "Before you go, there is something we must do." His voice was low. "For the benefit of the staff." Before she could question him, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. It was meant to be brief, perfunctory, a show for the servants watching discreetly from the house. But the moment their lips touched, Charlotte felt something electric pass between them, a current that made her breath catch. Alexander pulled back, his eyes widening fractionally. Had he felt it too, that unexpected spark? "Safe journey," he said, his voice rougher than before. "I will join you at Greymont when I can." As the carriage pulled away, Charlotte touched her fingers to her lips, still tingling from the kiss that was supposed to be mere duty, but had felt disturbingly like confession. Greymont Manor rose from the misty Devon coastline like something from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Towering grey stone, Gothic spires and windows that seemed to watch Charlotte as the carriage approached through the iron gates. The manor stood close to the edge of the cliffs, the restless sea churning below. "Welcome to Greymont, Your Grace," said the elderly butler, Simmons, as he greeted her at the entrance. His face was a careful mask, revealing nothing of what he thought of this new Duchess arriving alone. The housekeeper, Mrs. Hayes, appeared beside him, a robust woman with sharp eyes. "We've prepared the Duchess suite for you, Your Grace." "Not the master's chambers?" Charlotte asked. Mrs. Hayes and Simmons exchanged a glance. "The Duke was quite specific in his instructions," Simmons replied. "You are to have the Duchess suite in the East Wing." The East Wing, far from the master's chambers in the West Wing. Charlotte swallowed her disappointment. Why should she care where she slept? This was a marriage of convenience, nothing more. Yet as she followed Mrs. Hayes up the grand staircase, Charlotte could not help but feel the weight of Alexander's absence like a physical thing. The manor was immense, imposing, filled with portraits of stern-faced Hartleys from generations past. "The first Duchess, did she live here long?" Charlotte asked, as they walked the long corridor of the East Wing. Mrs. Hayes stiffened slightly. "Lady Eliza was mistress here for 3 years, Your Grace." "And was she happy?" The housekeeper stopped outside a set of double doors. "It is not my place to speak of such things." The Duchess' suite was beautiful, if somewhat austere. A sitting room in pale blue opened to a bedchamber, with a massive four-poster draped in cream silk. Windows overlooked the sea, the view both breathtaking and slightly terrifying, the sheer drop of the cliffs clearly visible. That evening, Dining alone in the cavernous dining room, Charlotte felt like a ghost haunting her own life. The servants were correct and proper, but there was something in their manner, a watchfulness, an assessment, that made her uncomfortable. After dinner, restlessness drove her to explore. The manor was a maze of corridors, rooms both grand and intimate, some clearly unused for years. In the gallery, Charlotte paused before a portrait of a young woman with fair hair and a delicate face. There was no nameplate, but she knew instinctively this was Eliza, the first Duchess of Greymont. "She was very beautiful," came a voice from behind her. Charlotte started, turning to find an older gentleman watching her. He bowed slightly. "Dr. Edward Harrington, Your Grace, the local physician. I call at the manor regularly to check on old Lord Hartley, the Duke's grandfather. He resides in the North Wing." "I wasn't told there was family in residence," Charlotte said, frowning. "The old lord keeps to himself. He's been bedridden these past 2 years." Dr. Harrington's kind eyes studied her. "I was sorry to hear of your father's passing. You knew him?" "Many years ago. We were at Oxford together." The doctor glanced at Eliza's portrait. "I knew her as well. A gentle soul." "How did she die?" Charlotte asked directly. "I've heard rumors of a fall, but little else." Dr. Harrington's expression grew guarded. "Accidents happen on these cliffs, Your Grace. The paths can be treacherous, especially in the dark. Was it night when she fell?" "It was." He seemed reluctant to continue, but something in Charlotte's gaze compelled him. "She was found at dawn, on the rocks below. The Duke himself carried her body back to the manor." Charlotte shivered. "Was there an investigation?" "The coroner ruled it death by misadventure. The Duchess had been known to walk the cliff path to clear her head. It was assumed she strayed too close to the edge in the darkness." Before Charlotte could ask more, Simmons appeared, his face disapproving. "Dr. Harrington, the old lord is asking for you." "Your Grace, a letter has arrived from London." In her chambers, Charlotte broke the Duke's seal with trembling fingers. "Charlotte, business keeps me in London longer than anticipated. I trust you are settling into Greymont and acquainting yourself with your duties. Mrs. Hayes and Simmons will guide you in household matters. There is something I must address. You may hear talk of Eliza. Disregard any gossip. Her death was a tragedy, but nothing more than an accident. The staff have been instructed not to speak of it, but country houses breed stories like damp breeds mold. I ask only that you respect the boundaries I have set. The West Wing, particularly my private study, is not to be entered. Old Lord Hartley in the North Wing is not to be disturbed except by Dr. Harrington or his nurse. I will join you when circumstances allow. Alexander." The letter left Charlotte more unsettled than before. Why specifically forbid her from seeing the old lord? And what was in the West Wing study that required such secrecy? Over the following days, Charlotte threw herself into learning the workings of Greymont. She reviewed household accounts with Mrs. Hayes, inspected the kitchens and began making subtle changes to the oppressively dark decor of the main rooms. If she was to be mistress here, even in name only, she would bring some light into this gloomy place. One afternoon, while walking the grounds, she came across the head gardener, MacGregor, an aged Scotsman with gnarled hands and knowing eyes. "You're braver than the last one, walking these paths alone," he commented, watching her from beneath bushy brows. "The last Duchess, you mean?" Charlotte asked. MacGregor nodded. "Lady Eliza. Afraid of heights, she was. Wouldn't go near the cliff edge." He glanced toward the sea, his expression troubled. "Made it all the stranger, her ending up down there. If she feared heights, why would she walk the cliff path at night? That's the question, isn't it? Never made sense to me." He studied Charlotte's face. "Be careful in this house, Your Grace. Old stones keep old secrets." That night, unable to sleep, Charlotte found herself drawn to the forbidden West Wing. The corridors were silent, the manor sleeping. The door to Alexander's study was locked, but a connecting door to an adjoining sitting room stood slightly ajar. Heart pounding, she slipped inside. Moonlight filtered through tall windows, casting the room in silver and shadow. It was a masculine space. Leather chairs, heavy oak furniture, shelves lined with books. A large desk dominated one wall, its surface neat and orderly. Charlotte moved cautiously, knowing she was trespassing but unable to resist. On the desk sat a small silver frame turned face down. She lifted it to find a portrait of Eliza, smiling brightly, her fair hair loose around her shoulders. Something about seeing the formal portrait in the gallery reduced to this hidden personal memento made Charlotte's chest tighten. A leather journal lay beside it. Before she could question the wisdom of her actions, Charlotte opened it. The handwriting was elegant, feminine. Eliza's diary. She flipped to the final entries, pulse racing. April 3, 1868. He watches me constantly. I cannot breathe in this house anymore. The walls close in with each passing day. I have written to father, begging to come home, but Alexander has intercepted my letters. He claims it is for my own good, that I am unwell, but I know what I saw that night in the study. April 10th, 1868. Dr. Harrington has prescribed laudanum for my nerves. I pretend to take it but dispose of it when no one is looking. I must keep my wits. If anything happens to me, let it be known that I fear my husband. The accident with his first fiancée before me, was it truly an accident? I have found... The entry ended abruptly. Charlotte turned the page, but the rest was blank. First fiancé? Alexander had been engaged before Eliza. A noise in the hallway startled her. Charlotte quickly returned the diary and frame to their original positions and slipped out through the sitting room, her mind reeling. She was nearly back to the east wing when a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking her path. Dr. Harrington. "It's late for a stroll, Your Grace," he said quietly. I couldn't sleep. She forced a calm she didn't feel. These old houses can be unsettling at first. His eyes, kind earlier, now seemed to assess her with clinical detachment. "I could prescribe something. For your nerves." The echo of Eliza's diary entry made Charlotte's blood run cold. "No, thank you. I prefer to keep a clear head." "As you wish." He stepped aside. "Good night, Your Grace." "Doctor," she called as he turned to go. "You mentioned you knew my father from Oxford. What was his name?" A pause, barely perceptible. "Henry Sinclair, of course." "My father's name was William," Charlotte said softly. "He attended Cambridge, not Oxford." In the dim light, she saw Harrington's expression harden. "A simple mistake. Good night, Your Grace." Back in her chambers, Charlotte locked the door and pushed a chair against it for good measure. Sleep eluded her entirely. The next morning brought unexpected news. The Duke would arrive that afternoon. Charlotte spent the day in a state of nervous anticipation, unsure whether to confront him with what she had discovered or to bide her time and gather more information. Alexander arrived as the afternoon shadows lengthened. Charlotte received him in the drawing-room, dressed in a gown of deep burgundy that Lily had assured her brought out the auburn highlights in her chestnut hair. "You look well," Alexander said after a moment of silence. "Country air agrees with you." "Greymont is beautiful in its way," she replied carefully, though somewhat secretive. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Have you been exploring, Charlotte?" "Merely learning my new home." She met his gaze directly. "I've met Dr. Harrington. He claimed to know my father, though he couldn't recall his name correctly. Harrington is getting on in years, his memory fails him at times. And old Lord Hartley. I haven't been introduced. My grandfather is very ill. Visitors upset him." Alexander moved to the sideboard and poured himself a brandy. "I understand you've made some changes to the house." "Small ones, lightening some of the heavier draperies, bringing flowers in from the gardens." Charlotte watched him. "I hope you don't mind. It's your home now, too." He took a sip of his brandy. "Within the boundaries I've set." "About those boundaries," Charlotte chose her words carefully. "Might I ask why your study is forbidden to me? As your wife, albeit in name only, shouldn't I have access to the house in its entirety?" Alexander set down his glass with deliberate care. "Some spaces remain private, even between husband and wife, especially in an arrangement such as ours." "An arrangement," she repeated. "Yes, I suppose that's all it is." Something flickered in his eyes. Frustration? Regret? "It's what we agreed to, Charlotte." "Indeed." She stood, smoothing her skirts. "Will you be staying long?" "A few days. I have business in Plymouth as well." Dinner that evening was a tense affair. Alexander attempted conversation about London society, politics, books, safe topics that required no personal revelation. Charlotte responded politely, but could not shake the feeling that she was dining with a man wearing a carefully constructed mask. After the meal, rather than retiring immediately as she expected, Alexander suggested a walk in the gardens. The evening was mild, the moon casting silver light across the manicured lawns. "You've been quiet," he observed as they strolled along a gravel path. "I've been thinking," Charlotte replied, "about Eliza." Alexander stopped walking. "I asked you not to heed the gossip." "It wasn't gossip, it was her diary." His face went rigid. "You went into my study." "Yes." Charlotte lifted her chin. "And I found her journal. She was afraid, Alexander. She said you were watching her, intercepting her letters. She mentioned a previous fiancé, an accident. You had no right." His voice was low, dangerous. "As your wife, I had every right to know what kind of man I married." The words burst from her with unexpected force. "Did you kill her, Alexander? Is that why you keep everyone away from the West Wing? Why you've hidden yourself away from society these past 5 years?" In the moonlight, his face was a study in shadows. "Is that what you believe of me? That I am a murderer?" "I don't know what to believe," she whispered. "Tell me the truth." For a long moment he said nothing, his breathing harsh in the quiet garden. Then, "Come with me." He led her not to the West Wing, but toward the cliffs. Charlotte's heart hammered in her chest as they followed a narrow path that wound along the precipice. The sea crashed against the rocks far below, a constant, threatening roar. "This is where she fell," Alexander said finally, stopping at a point where the path curved dangerously close to the edge, or rather where she jumped. "Jumped?" Charlotte stared at him. "Eliza's diary said nothing about, because she didn't write it down." His voice was hollow. "Eliza was not well, Charlotte. She suffered from melancholia, delusions. She believed I was conspiring against her, that I had somehow caused harm to come to Constance, my first fiancée. What happened to Constance? Pneumonia. We were to be married in the spring of '65, but she fell ill in the winter and never recovered." His eyes were distant, lost in memory. "It was a conventional match, arranged by our families. I respected her, but there was no great passion between us. Her death was a tragedy, nothing more sinister." "And Eliza? You loved her?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "I thought I did. She was beautiful, vivacious, everything Constance was not. But after our marriage, she changed, became paranoid, erratic. The doctors called it nervous hysteria. She accused me of terrible things, poisoning her, conspiring with the staff to drive her mad. Why would she think that? Because of the child." Charlotte felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "Child? Eliza was with child when she died." Alexander's voice broke slightly. "She had lost 2 pregnancies before. The doctors warned her a third might be dangerous, but she was determined. When she began to show signs of the same complications, I insisted she rest, take the medicines Dr. Harrington prescribed. She became convinced I was trying to harm the baby." "Was Dr. Harrington treating her?" "Yes. He's been the family physician for decades." Charlotte frowned. "He lied about knowing my father." "What?" "When we met, he claimed to know my father from Oxford. When I questioned him, he couldn't recall my father's name correctly." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "Harrington has his peculiarities, but he's a good doctor. He tried to help Eliza. And the night she died, we argued." Alexander turned away, facing the sea. "She accused me of replacing her medicine with poison. She was hysterical, threatened to expose me as a murderer. I tried to calm her, but she fled the house. By the time I realized she had gone toward the cliffs, it was too late." His voice grew so quiet, Charlotte had to strain to hear him. "I saw her standing at the edge. I called out to her, but she just looked at me with such emptiness. Then she stepped forward into the air." Charlotte felt tears stinging her eyes. "You couldn't have saved her." "Couldn't I?" He turned back to her, his face ravaged by grief and guilt. "If I had been more patient, more understanding of her fears. If I had insisted she see a different doctor, one from London perhaps, who might have treated her condition differently. You can't know that would have changed anything." "No, but the not knowing has haunted me these 5 years." He looked down at the rocks below. "I carried her body back up that morning, her and our unborn child. The servants saw me, clothes soaked with seawater and her blood. The rumors began immediately." Charlotte reached out, touching his arm. "Is that why you isolated yourself? Why you sought a marriage in name only? Because you blame yourself? Alexander did not pull away from her touch. I blamed myself, yes, and I vowed never to risk such pain again, either for myself or for another woman foolish enough to love me. But our arrangement, it protects me too, Charlotte said softly. You've given me safety, security. Yes? His eyes, when they met hers, held a strange mix of emotions. That was my intention. Later that night, Charlotte lay awake, replaying their conversation. She believed Alexander's account of Eliza's death. The raw pain in his voice could not have been feigned. Yet something still felt unresolved, a piece of the puzzle missing. Why had Dr. Harrington lied about knowing her father? And what of old Lord Hartley, sequestered in the north wing? The house seemed full of half-truths and secrets. As dawn broke, Charlotte made a decision. She would visit the old lord, boundaries or no. If Alexander truly had nothing to hide, he would forgive her this one transgression. The north wing was quiet, the corridors dusty with disuse, save for one well-travelled path leading to the old lord's chambers. Charlotte moved silently, having risen early to ensure Alexander would still be asleep. The door to Lord Hartley's rooms was unlocked. Inside, the sitting room was well appointed, but felt unused, like a museum display. Charlotte hesitated at the door to the bedchamber beyond, suddenly uncertain of her course. "You may as well come in," called a querulous voice from within. "I heard you in the corridor." Taking a deep breath, Charlotte entered. The room was dimly lit, despite the morning sun, heavy curtains drawn across the windows. In a massive four-poster lay an elderly man, his frame shrunken beneath the bedclothes, his face deeply lined, but his eyes sharp and alert. "So you're her," he said, studying Charlotte with undisguised interest. "The new Duchess. Come closer, girl, my eyes aren't what they were." Charlotte approached the bed, curtsying slightly. "Lord Hartley, I apologize for intruding." "Intruding?" He gave a dry chuckle. "First visitor in weeks besides that pompous doctor and my sour-faced nurse. Sit, sit." He gestured to a chair beside the bed. Charlotte sat, studying the old man's face. The resemblance to Alexander was clear in the shape of his eyes, the strong line of his jaw, though age had softened both. "You're bolder than the last one," Lord Hartley observed. "She never dared come here." "Eliza, you mean?" "Afraid of me she was, or afraid of what I might say." He narrowed his eyes. "Why are you here, girl? What do you want from an old man?" Charlotte decided on honesty. "Answers, my lord. About this house, about Eliza's death, about Alexander." "Ah," he nodded slowly. "You think there's some dark secret, eh? That my grandson might have pushed his pretty wife off the cliff?" His tone was mocking. "Alexander couldn't harm a fly, too soft by half. Then you don't believe the rumors?" "Rumors?" Lord Hartley spat the word. "Country folk with nothing better to do than whisper about their betters. No, girl, Alexander didn't kill Eliza, but there is blame to be laid." "With whom?" The old man's face darkened. "That doctor, Harrington." Charlotte leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Eliza was sick, yes, but not in the way they said, not in her mind." He gestured weakly toward a cabinet across the room. "Top drawer. Bring me the papers inside." Charlotte did as he asked, retrieving a folder tied with faded ribbon. Lord Hartley's gnarled fingers fumbled with the knot, before finally opening it to reveal several letters and what appeared to be medical notes. "I've kept these hidden," he said. "After Eliza died, Alexander was nearly mad with grief. Better he didn't know." "Know what?" Charlotte asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "Harrington was poisoning her." Lord Hartley handed her one of the papers. "Arsenic, small doses in her medicine for hysteria, enough to make her seem mad, but not enough to kill her outright. Except she was with child and the baby was more susceptible." Charlotte stared at the paper, a chemical analysis from a London laboratory. "How did you obtain this?" "I had my suspicions. Eliza came to me once, said she thought her medicine was making her worse rather than better. I sent samples to London without Harrington's knowledge. But why would he do such a thing?" "Money." Lord Hartley's face twisted with disgust. "He's been in debt for years, gambling, and he knew about the trust." "What trust?" "Alexander's mother, my daughter, established a trust before her death. If Alexander died without heirs, a significant portion of the Greymont fortune would go to medical research, overseen by a board of physicians. Harrington would have been the primary administrator." Charlotte felt sick. He was poisoning Eliza to prevent her from giving Alexander an heir, and driving her mad in the process. By the time she jumped from that cliff, she believed Alexander was trying to kill her. The old man's eyes filled with tears. My grandson has spent 5 years blaming himself for a death that Harrington orchestrated. Why haven't you told him the truth? Because he would kill Harrington and hang for it. Lord Hartley gripped her wrist with surprising strength. I've been gathering evidence slowly, carefully, but I'm dying, girl. I won't see justice done. But I will, Charlotte said, a fierce determination taking hold. We need proof that will stand in court. These tests show arsenic, but don't directly implicate Harrington. Check his records, Lord Hartley suggested. He keeps detailed notes on all his patients. And speak to McGregor. He saw something the night Eliza died, something he's never told anyone but me. The sound of footsteps in the corridor interrupted them. Charlotte quickly gathered the papers and returned them to the drawer as the door opened to reveal the very man they had been discussing. Duchesses. Harrington froze in the doorway, his eyes darting between Charlotte and the old lord. Your Grace, this is unexpected. I wish to meet my husband's grandfather, Charlotte said, rising from her seat. We've had a lovely chat. I'm afraid visiting excites the patient unduly, Harrington said, his tone professionally concerned but his eyes cold. Lord Hartley requires absolute rest. Nonsense, barked the old man. The girl's company does me good. Better than your foul medicines, at any rate. A muscle twitched in Harrington's jaw. Nevertheless, it's time for your treatment. Charlotte gave Lord Hartley's hand a gentle squeeze. I'll visit again soon, my lord. See that you do, Duchess, he replied, his eyes conveying a silent warning. And remember what we discussed. In the corridor outside, Harrington caught Charlotte's arm. Your Grace, I must insist you respect the Duke's wishes regarding his grandfather. The old man's mind wanders. Whatever he told you was most illuminating, Doctor. Charlotte extricated her arm from his grasp. Good day. She hurried back to the east wing, mind racing. If Lord Hartley was right, Harrington was not only a murderer, but still a threat. The terms of the trust would remain in effect until Alexander had an heir, which, given the nature of their marriage, seemed unlikely. Unless... Charlotte pushed the thought aside. This was no time for such considerations. She needed to speak with McGregor, and then find a way to access Harrington's medical records. She found the gardener in the greenhouse tending to exotic orchids. McGregor, might I speak with you privately? The old Scotsman straightened, eyes wary. Aye, Your Grace. Once they were alone among the fragrant blooms, Charlotte spoke directly. Lord Hartley says you saw something the night Lady Eliza died, something you've never spoken of except to him. McGregor paled. His lordship should not have told you that. But he did, and now I need to know what you saw. The gardener's weathered hands trembled slightly as he turned back to his plants. I couldn't sleep that night. My joints pain me when rain's coming. I was walking near the cliff path smoking my pipe when I heard voices. Voices? More than one? He nodded. The Duchess, certainly. She was distraught, speaking wildly. And a man. Alexander? No, Your Grace. The Duke was calling her name from the house. This was another voice closer to her on the path. Dr. Harrington, Charlotte whispered. I didn't see his face clear, McGregor said carefully, but I heard him say, It's better this way, Eliza. You're not well, you never will be well. And then, he swallowed hard. Then there was a scream and silence. You think he pushed her? Or convinced her to jump? I'll never know. I was too far away. Shame crossed his features. I should have come forward at the time, but I was afraid. The doctor is a powerful man in these parts. Powerful enough to arrange an accident for an inconvenient witness, Charlotte agreed grimly. Thank you for telling me now, McGregor. You've been braver than you know. Back at the house, Charlotte was surprised to find Alexander waiting for her in the drawing room, his face stormy. You visited my grandfather, he said without preamble, after I explicitly asked you not to. Charlotte lifted her chin. Yes. Why? Alexander paced before the fireplace. Was my account of events not enough? Do you still believe me capable of— No, she interrupted. I believe you completely, Alexander. That's why I went to see him. He stopped pacing, studying her face. What do you mean? I wanted to understand what happened to Eliza. Not because I suspected you, but because something about this house, about Dr. Harrington, felt wrong. She stepped closer. Your grandfather had much to say on the matter. Carefully, Charlotte related everything Lord Hartley had told her about the arsenic, the trust, Harrington's debts. With each word, Alexander's expression grew darker, a muscle working in his jaw. "MacGregor confirmed it," she finished. "He was near the cliffs that night. He heard Harrington with Eliza before she fell." Alexander turned away abruptly, his hands clenched into fists. "If this is true—" "It is," Charlotte said firmly. "Your grandfather has evidence, and MacGregor is willing to testify to what he heard. But we need more. Harrington's medical records would prove he was prescribing arsenic to Eliza. His offices are in the village." Alexander's voice was dangerously calm. "He keeps his records there. Then we must obtain them." Charlotte touched his arm gently. "Not through violence, Alexander. Through the law. Justice for Eliza, not revenge." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then met her eyes. "You've risked much to uncover this. She deserved the truth, as did you." Charlotte hesitated. "And I couldn't bear to see you suffering under a burden that was never yours to carry." Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a softening, a vulnerability she had never seen before. "Why do you care what I suffer, Charlotte? Ours is an arrangement, nothing more." "Is it?" she whispered, surprising herself with the question. "Sometimes I wonder if it might become something else entirely." His breath caught. For a moment it seemed he might reach for her, but the sound of footsteps in the hall broke the tension between them. Simmons appeared at the door. "Pardon me, Your Grace. Dr. Harrington is departing, and wishes to inform you that he will return tomorrow to check on Lord Hartley." "Is he indeed?" Alexander's voice had regained its cool control. "Thank you, Simmons." When they were alone again, Charlotte found herself unable to recapture the moment of intimacy that had passed between them. Alexander had withdrawn once more, behind his mask of detachment. "We should act quickly," she said, reverting to the matter at hand. "If Harrington suspects we know anything, he might destroy the evidence." Alexander nodded. "I'll ride to Plymouth tomorrow. There's a magistrate there, I trust. With Lord Hartley's evidence and MacGregor's testimony, we can obtain a warrant to search Harrington's offices." "And what of his visit tomorrow? Should we allow him near your grandfather?" "No." Alexander's expression hardened. "I'll instruct Simmons that Harrington is not to be admitted. I'll have one of the footmen stand guard at the north wing." That night, Charlotte could not sleep. The revelations of the day swirled in her mind, but more than that, the moment in the drawing room with Alexander kept replaying itself. The look in his eyes when she had touched his arm, the possibility that hung in the air between them. Near midnight, unable to remain abed any longer, she wrapped a shawl around her nightdress and ventured out onto her private balcony. The night was clear, the moon casting silver light across the grounds and the sea beyond. The wind carried the scent of salt and wild roses, a strangely comforting combination. "You should be sleeping," came Alexander's voice from below. Charlotte started, peering down to see him standing in the garden. "As should you. I find sleep elusive these days." He looked up at her, his face partially shadowed. "May I join you? Or would that be improper?" A smile tugged at her lips. "I think we're well past concerns of propriety, don't you? There's a door from the garden to the east wing staircase." Minutes later, he appeared at her sitting-room door, still fully dressed despite the hour. Charlotte was suddenly acutely aware of her state, hair loose down her back, feet bare beneath her nightdress and robe. "Perhaps this was unwise," Alexander said, hesitating at the threshold. "Perhaps," she agreed, "but I find I don't care." He entered, closing the door quietly behind him. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the space between them charged with unspoken emotions. "I've been thinking about what you said," Alexander finally broke the silence, "about our arrangement possibly becoming something else." Charlotte's heart beat faster. "And what conclusion did you reach?" "That I've been a fool." He took a step closer. "I married you to save you from your uncle, to give you security. I convinced myself it was enough, that keeping my distance was the honorable thing to do. And now?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Now I find myself thinking of you constantly. The way you've brought light back into this house, your courage in facing Harrington, in seeking the truth about Eliza." Another step closer. "The way you looked at me in the drawing room today, as if you could see past all my walls." Charlotte felt as though she could scarcely breathe. "Alexander, I told myself I would never risk loving someone again, he continued, now close enough that she could see the pulse beating in his throat. But I find that some risks cannot be avoided, no matter how carefully one plans. Are you saying... I'm saying that our marriage may have begun as an arrangement, Charlotte, but my feelings for you are becoming decidedly inconvenient. A small laugh escaped her, half joy, half disbelief. Inconvenient. Terrifying, he amended, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Wonderful, overwhelming. I know the feeling, she admitted, gathering her courage. I've tried to remind myself that you wanted a wife in name only, but then you kissed me that day in London and nothing has felt the same since. Alexander's eyes darkened. That kiss has haunted me. I told myself it was for appearance's sake, but the truth is, I've wanted to kiss you again every day since. What's stopping you? Charlotte challenged softly. For an answer, he closed the distance between them, one hand coming up to cup her cheek with exquisite gentleness. When his lips met hers, it was nothing like their first brief kiss in London. This was slow, deliberate, a question and an answer all at once. Charlotte's arms wound around his neck as she rose on her toes to meet him more fully. The kiss deepened, years of Alexander's carefully maintained control giving way to something raw and honest. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I should go, he murmured, though he made no move to release her. This is hardly proper. Stay, Charlotte whispered. Not for... just stay. Talk with me. I feel as though I'm only now beginning to know the real Alexander Hartley. A vulnerability crossed his features that made her heart ache. Are you certain? I am. She took his hand and led him to the small sofa before the fireplace in her sitting room. Tell me about yourself. Not the Duke of Greymont, but the man. And so he did. They talked through the night, the barriers between them falling away hour by hour. Alexander spoke of his childhood at Greymont, of his parents' early deaths, of his grandfather's stern but loving guardianship. Charlotte told him of her own upbringing, of her mother's gentle influence, of her father's encouragement of her education and independence. He would have liked you, she said, her head now resting against Alexander's shoulder as dawn began to lighten the sky outside. My father, I mean. He always said I should marry a man who valued my mind as well as my face. I value everything about you, Alexander said, his fingers gently stroking through her hair. Your courage, your compassion, your stubborn determination to uncover the truth regardless of the consequences. Even when that determination leads me to disobey your direct instructions, she asked, a teasing note in her voice. He chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her ear. Especially then, though I reserve the right to be thoroughly irritated by it in the moment. Charlotte lifted her head to look at him. What happens now, Alexander? With us? His expression grew serious. That depends entirely on what you want, Charlotte. I married you offering security and independence. Those remain yours regardless of developments between us. And what do you want? A real marriage, he said simply. Not merely in name, but in every sense. I want to share my life with you if you'll have me. Joy bloomed in Charlotte's chest, bright and unexpected. I think I would like that very much. The kiss they shared then was tender, full of promise. When they parted, Alexander pressed his forehead to hers. I should go. You need rest, and I must prepare for my journey to Plymouth. Be careful, Charlotte said. Harrington is dangerous. I will return by nightfall, with the magistrate's warrant. He kissed her once more, then reluctantly rose. Lock your door after I leave, and don't venture out alone. Promise me. I promise. She walked him to the door, suddenly loath to see him go. Alexander, I think I may be falling in love with you. The smile that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking through clouds. What a fortunate coincidence, my dear, for I am quite certain I am already in love with you. After he left, Charlotte did as he asked, locking her door securely. Despite having been awake all night, she felt more alive than she had in months. She rang for Lily, deciding that she would rest later. For now, there was too much to do. So you're glowing this morning, Your Grace, Lily observed as she helped Charlotte dress. Has something happened? Many things, Charlotte replied cryptically, and I suspect more will happen before the day is out. She spent the morning with Lord Hartley, explaining Alexander's plan and ensuring the old man was comfortable and secure. A footman was stationed outside his door, with instructions to admit no one but Charlotte or the nurse. "You've done well, girl," Lord Hartley said, patting her hand. "You'll make a proper duchess yet." "I hope to be more than that," Charlotte replied. "I hope to be a proper wife to your grandson as well." The old man's eyes twinkled. "Ah, so he's finally come to his senses, has he? Good. The Hartley line needs continuing, and you've got a strong spirit. Make for healthy children." Charlotte blushed, but didn't contradict him. The thought of children with Alexander, creating a family together at Greymont, filled her with unexpected longing. Midday brought unwelcome news. Despite Alexander's instructions, Dr. Harrington had somehow gained entry to the house and was demanding to see Lord Hartley. "I refused him access to the north wing as ordered, Your Grace," Simmons reported, clearly distressed. "But he insists it's a medical emergency. He claims to have received a message that the old lord has taken a turn for the worse." "No such message was sent," Charlotte said firmly. "I've been with Lord Hartley all morning. He's as well as can be expected." "The doctor is most insistent, Your Grace. He's waiting in the library." "Then I shall speak with him myself." Charlotte squared her shoulders, drawing on every ounce of aristocratic bearing her father had instilled in her. "Have 2 footmen accompany me and remain in the room." Harrington was pacing the library when she entered, his normally composed demeanor showing cracks of agitation. He turned as Charlotte approached, offering a stiff bow. "Your Grace, I must insist on seeing Lord Hartley immediately. I have reason to believe he may have suffered an apoplectic fit." "How curious," Charlotte replied coolly. "I was with Lord Hartley not half an hour ago, and he was perfectly lucid. Who gave you this information, Doctor?" Harrington's eyes narrowed slightly. "A messenger brought word to my office." "How strange that this messenger didn't alert anyone else in the household, particularly as the Duke left specific instructions that you were not to be admitted during his absence." "Did he indeed?" Harrington's tone hardened. "May I ask why?" "I think you know why, Doctor." Charlotte held his gaze steadily. "Just as you know there was no messenger, no apoplectic fit. You came here hoping to silence Lord Hartley before he could share what he knows about Eliza's death." The colour drained from Harrington's face. "I don't know what the old man has been telling you, Your Grace, but his mind is failing. Whatever accusations are supported by evidence," Charlotte interrupted. "Chemical analysis of the medicines you prescribed for Eliza. McGregor's eyewitness account of what he heard on the cliff path that night. Your own medical records, which I suspect contain detailed notes of your systematic poisoning." For a moment, Harrington seemed to deflate, his shoulders sagging. Then, with alarming swiftness, he pulled a small pistol from his coat pocket. "I had hoped to resolve this quietly," he said, his voice eerily calm. "A tragic relapse for the old lord, a grieving granddaughter-in-law overcome by the strain of it all, perhaps wandering too close to those treacherous cliffs herself." The footman moved forward, but Harrington waved the pistol at them. "Stay back or the Duchess dies where she stands." Charlotte's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "You won't escape, Harrington. Alexander has gone to Plymouth for a warrant. Even if you kill me, justice will find you. Perhaps, but I've nothing left to lose, have I?" A bitter smile twisted his features. 5 years I've waited. 5 years of watching that fortune sit unclaimed, while my creditors circle like vultures. And then he brings you here, young, fertile, a threat to everything. "The trust," Charlotte said, understanding. "You still hope to control the Greymont fortune if Alexander dies without an heir." "It should have been mine years ago." Harrington's composure cracked entirely. "Eliza was supposed to be barren. The arsenic should have ensured it. But somehow she conceived again. I couldn't let that child be born." "So you drove her to madness, convinced her Alexander was trying to poison her." It was elegant, really. A gleam of twisted pride shone in his eyes. She did most of the work herself, growing more paranoid by the day. By the end, it took very little persuasion to lead her to those cliffs. "You're a monster," Charlotte whispered. "I am a man of science who has been denied his due." He gestured with the pistol toward the door. "Now we're going for a walk to the cliffs. Don't try to alert anyone or I'll shoot you here and claim self-defense." A duchess gone mad, just like her predecessor. Charlotte's mind raced. If she went with him to the cliffs, she would never return. Her only chance was to stall, to keep him talking until help might come. But who would come? Alexander was in Plymouth, the servants intimidated by the pistol. As Harrington forced her toward the door, a commotion in the hall distracted him momentarily. The library doors burst open to reveal McGregor, his weathered face grim, a shotgun in his gnarled hands. "I heard enough," the old gardener said, his Scottish burr more pronounced in his anger. "Put down the pistol, Doctor, or I'll put you down myself." Harrington snarled, swinging his pistol toward McGregor. Charlotte seized the moment, grabbing a heavy brass candlestick from the table beside her and bringing it down on Harrington's wrist with all her strength. The pistol fired, the shot going wild into the ceiling as the doctor howled in pain. The footman surged forward, wrestling Harrington to the ground. One kicked the fallen pistol away, while the other pinned the struggling doctor's arms behind his back. "Bind him securely," Charlotte ordered, her voice remarkably steady despite her racing heart. "McGregor, send a rider to Plymouth immediately. The Duke must be informed of what has happened." "Aye, Your Grace." The gardener lowered his shotgun, his rheumy eyes filled with satisfaction. Justice for Lady Eliza at last. Hours later, Alexander returned with the magistrate and 2 constables to find Harrington locked in the wine cellar under guard. After taking statements from Charlotte, McGregor, and even Lord Hartley, who insisted on being carried downstairs to testify, the magistrate ordered Harrington removed to Plymouth to await trial. "His offices have already been searched," Alexander told Charlotte as they watched the carriage bearing the doctor and his guards disappear down the drive. "The evidence was there, just as you suspected. Detailed records of the arsenic doses, observations of Eliza's deteriorating condition. He documented it all, the arrogant fool." "He thought himself untouchable," Charlotte said. "Men like that often do." Alexander turned to her, his face grave. "When I heard what happened, that he had threatened you with a pistol," his voice broke. "If I had lost you—" "But you didn't," Charlotte said softly, taking his hand. "I'm here, Alexander. I'm safe." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her as though he might never let her go. "I rode back like a madman, certain I would be too late. All I could think was that I had only just found you, only just realized what you mean to me." "Shh," Charlotte soothed, her hands coming up to frame his face. "It's over now. Harrington will face justice for what he did to Eliza, and we have our whole lives ahead of us." Alexander's eyes, so long haunted by guilt and grief, were clear as he gazed down at her. "Yes," he said, his voice gaining strength. "We do. And I intend to make each day count, Charlotte. No more half measures, no more arrangements. A true marriage in every sense." "I would like that very much," she whispered, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. The kiss deepened, there in the fading afternoon light, witnessed only by the ancient stones of Greymont Manor and the sea beyond. When they finally parted, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Charlotte Hartley," he said, the words a vow and a promise. "With all that I am, I love you." "And I love you," she replied, her heart so full it seemed it might overflow. "My Duke, my husband, my love." Spring came to Greymont Manor, bringing with it renewal in more ways than one. The gardens bloomed under McGregor's care. The house itself seemed lighter, brighter, and the cloud of suspicion that had hung over the cliffs for 5 long years had finally dispersed with Harrington's conviction. The trial had been swift and decisive. With Lord Hartley's evidence, McGregor's testimony, and the damning contents of Harrington's own records, the doctor was sentenced to transportation for life. Justice for Eliza had been served, allowing Alexander to finally lay his guilt to rest. In the rose garden, Charlotte sat beside Lord Hartley's wheeled chair, reading aloud from a volume of poetry, while her husband paced nearby, deep in conversation with his land steward about spring planting. "He's changed," the old lord observed, interrupting Charlotte mid-verse. "Never seen him so animated. That's your doing, girl." Charlotte smiled, watching Alexander gesticulate as he described some new agricultural technique he wished to implement. "We've changed each other, I think. Healed each other." "Humph. Well, when are you going to give me a great-grandchild?" Lord Hartley demanded with typical bluntness. "I'm not getting any younger, you know." A blush heated Charlotte's cheeks. "Actually, my lord, I had planned to tell you both at dinner, but since you ask—" She lowered her voice. "The doctor from Plymouth confirmed it yesterday. The baby should arrive by Christmas." The old man's face split into a broad grin. "Ha! I knew it. Something about the way you've been glowing these past weeks." He thumped his cane on the ground. "Alexander, come here, boy. Your wife has news." Alexander looked up, frowning at the interruption, but excused himself from the steward and approached. "What is it? Is grandfather taxing your patience again, Charlotte?" "On the contrary," she said, rising to meet him, suddenly shy despite the months of deepening intimacy between them. "He's merely impatient for news I had planned to share more privately." Understanding dawned in Alexander's eyes. "Charlotte, are you saying—" She nodded, her smile blooming as bright as the roses around them. "Yes, we're to have a child, Alexander, by Christmas." For a moment he stood perfectly still, his expression one of stunned wonder. Then, with a whoop that startled a nearby gardener, he swept Charlotte into his arms, spinning her in a circle before setting her carefully back on her feet. "A child," he breathed, one hand coming to rest reverently on her still, flat stomach. "Our child." "Yes." She covered his hand with her own. "Are you pleased?" "Pleased?" Alexander laughed, the sound so free and joyous it brought tears to Charlotte's eyes. "My darling, I am beyond pleased. I am transcendent." Lord Hartley harumphed from his chair. "Well, don't just stand there gaping like a fish, boy. Kiss your wife properly." Alexander did just that, heedless of the servants pretending not to watch or his grandfather's approving nods. When they parted, both breathless, he kept her close in the circle of his arms. "I was so afraid," he confessed quietly. "After what happened with Eliza, the thought of you carrying our child, I feared history might repeat itself." "It won't," Charlotte said firmly. "Harrington is gone, and I am not Eliza, Alexander. I'm stronger than you think." "Oh, I know exactly how strong you are." His eyes were tender as they traced her features. "You saved me, Charlotte. From my guilt, from my solitude, from a half-life of arrangements and duty without joy." "We saved each other," she corrected. "I came to Greymont seeking safety, but I found so much more. I found home. I found love." As the summer progressed, Greymont Manor continued its transformation. Charlotte, despite her advancing pregnancy, threw herself into preparations for the child. The nursery in the West Wing, long closed off, was opened, aired, and refurbished. Alexander insisted on personally overseeing every detail, from the selection of the safest cradle to the hiring of a nurse with impeccable references. "You're hovering again," Charlotte teased one afternoon, as he fussed over whether she was sitting in the most comfortable chair in the library. "I'm attending to my wife's needs," he corrected with dignity. "There's a difference." She pulled him down for a kiss. "You're hovering, but I find I don't mind it nearly as much as I should." Alexander rested his hand on the swell of her belly, where their child had recently begun to make its presence known, with fluttering kicks. "Can you blame me for wanting to protect you both?" "No," she said softly. "Just as I hope you don't blame me for insisting on living fully despite your protective instincts. I refuse to be treated as fragile, Alexander." "Heaven forbid," he murmured, smiling against her hair. The woman who faced down a murderer with nothing but a brass candlestick could never be described as fragile. The arrival of a letter from London in late summer brought unexpected news. Charlotte found Alexander in his study, no longer forbidden to her but rather their shared sanctuary, frowning over the correspondence. "What is it?" she asked, noting his troubled expression. "It's from your uncle," Alexander said, handing her the letter. "Edmund Sinclair has died." Charlotte scanned the formal notification. Edmund had succumbed to apoplexy after a particularly vigorous night of gambling and drinking. There was to be a small funeral in London, and as his only living relative, Charlotte's presence was requested. "How do you feel?" Alexander asked gently when she looked up. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "He was not kind to me, yet he was my father's brother. I should feel something, shouldn't I?" "There's no should in grief or its absence," Alexander said, drawing her into his arms. "Whatever you feel is valid, Charlotte." She rested her head against his chest, taking comfort in the steady beat of his heart. "I think I feel pity more than anything. He lived such a narrow life, focused only on money and position. He never knew love, not really." "Unlike us," Alexander murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Do you wish to attend the funeral?" Charlotte considered this. "Yes, I think I do, not for him, but for my father, and perhaps for myself as well, to close that chapter completely." "Then we shall go to London," Alexander decided, "though we'll stay only as long as necessary. I want you back at Greymont well before the baby comes." The journey to London was made in easy stages, with frequent stops to ensure Charlotte's comfort. The city was in the midst of the late summer season, the parks lush with greenery, the streets busy with society attempting to escape the heat. The funeral itself was sparsely attended. A few creditors come to assess their chances of repayment, some distant connections of the Sinclair family, and a handful of Edmund's gambling companions. As the service concluded, Charlotte placed a single white rose on the casket. "Goodbye, uncle," she murmured. "I hope you find peace." As they turned to leave the churchyard, Charlotte noticed a familiar face among the departing mourners, Lord Barnaby, the man her uncle had once intended her to marry. Now, stooped and red-faced, he caught her eye and gave a curt nod before hurrying away. "Was that—" Alexander began, his arm tightening around her waist. "Yes," Charlotte said. "The man who might have been my husband, had fate not intervened." Alexander's expression darkened. "I should thank fate then, every day of my life." Charlotte smiled up at him. "As should I. Though I think we made our own fate, you and I." "Indeed we did," he agreed, his face softening as he looked at her, "and continue to do so." Their return to Greymont coincided with the harvest, the estate bustling with activity as crops were gathered and stored for winter. Lord Hartley, whose health had improved markedly over the summer, took to sitting on the terrace to oversee the work, offering gruff advice and criticism in equal measure. "He's like a different man," Alexander observed one evening as they watched the old lord holding court among the estate workers, regaling them with tales of harvests past. "I haven't seen him this engaged with life in years." "He has something to live for now," Charlotte said. "The promise of a future for Greymont, for the Hartley line." Alexander drew her against his side. "Speaking of which, have you given any thought to names for our child?" "I have," she admitted. "If it's a boy, I thought perhaps William after my father." "William Hartley," Alexander tested the name. "It has a noble ring to it. And if we have a daughter?" Charlotte hesitated. "I've been thinking, perhaps Eliza." Alexander stilled beside her. "Eliza?" "To honor her memory," Charlotte explained softly. "To acknowledge that her life mattered, that she deserved better than what happened to her. But if it's too painful for you—" "No," Alexander interrupted, his voice thick with emotion. "It's perfect, Charlotte. A way to reclaim her name from tragedy, to give it new life and joy." As autumn painted Greymont's grounds in gold and crimson, Charlotte's time grew near. The nursery was ready, tiny garments folded neatly in drawers, a rocking chair positioned by the window overlooking the sea. December arrived with gentle snows and festive preparations. Despite being in her final month of pregnancy, Charlotte insisted on supervising the Christmas decorations, bringing evergreen boughs and holly into the once somber manor. "You've transformed this place," Alexander said, as they sat before the fire in their bedchamber one evening, his hand making slow circles on her swollen belly. "When you arrived, it was a mausoleum. Now it's a home again." "We transformed it together," Charlotte corrected, covering his hand with her own. "Oh, did you feel that? Someone is eager to make your acquaintance." Alexander's face lit with wonder as he felt their child kick vigorously beneath his palm. "Strong, like their mother, and stubborn, like their father," she teased. "I suspect this little one will arrive on their own schedule, not the doctor's." As if in agreement, the first pains began shortly after midnight. Alexander, who had taken to sleeping lightly in these final weeks, was instantly alert at Charlotte's sharp intake of breath. "Is it time?" he asked, already rising to call for the midwife who had taken up residence at Greymont for the past fortnight. "I believe so," Charlotte confirmed, both nervous and exhilarated as another contraction gripped her. "Our child is coming, Alexander." What followed were hours of labor that tested Charlotte's endurance to its limits. Alexander refused to be banished to the traditional male domain of pacing the hall, instead remaining firmly by her side, supporting her through each wave of pain, whispering encouragements, wiping her brow with cool cloths. "You're doing beautifully," he told her, as dawn broke over the horizon, casting golden light across their chamber. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Charlotte Hartley." "I don't feel very strong at the moment," she gasped, gripping his hand hard enough to whiten his knuckles. "Then borrow my strength," he said simply. "I have enough for both of us." As morning gave way to afternoon, the midwife announced that the time had come. 3 more mighty efforts, and their child entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to Alexander's eyes. "A daughter," the midwife announced, placing the tiny red-faced infant on Charlotte's chest. "A perfect little girl." "Eliza," Charlotte whispered, gazing down at their daughter in awe. "Hello, my darling. We've been waiting for you." Alexander knelt beside the bed, one finger gently stroking the baby's velvet cheek. "She's magnificent," he breathed, "just like her mother." Later, after Charlotte and little Eliza had been bathed and settled, Alexander brought Lord Hartley to meet his great-granddaughter. The old man, usually so gruff, wept openly as he held the tiny bundle. "The Hartley line continues," he said, his voice rough with emotion, and finer than ever it was before. As twilight fell, Alexander sat on the edge of the bed beside Charlotte, their daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. Outside, snow began to fall gently, dusting Greymont's grounds in pristine white. "Are you happy, Charlotte?" Alexander asked, his voice soft in the quiet room. She looked up at him, this man who had entered her life as a stranger, become her protector, her partner, and finally, the great love of her life. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He bent to kiss her, then their daughter's downy head. "When you first came to Greymont, I offered you a contract of convenience, but what you gave me in return was a life of purpose, of joy." His voice broke slightly. "Of love." "Love," Charlotte echoed, smiling up at him. "The one thing neither of us expected to find, yet the only thing that truly matters in the end." As night settled over Greymont Manor, the little family remained together, safe in the warmth of their chamber, while winter claimed the world outside. The house that had once known such darkness and tragedy now glowed with light and life, its shadows banished by the love that had bloomed between a duke seeking redemption and a lady seeking safety. What they had found instead was each other, and in that discovery both had found home. The end. Dear listener, some houses hold secrets, some hearts do too, but even the oldest walls can learn to echo with laughter again. Tonight, as the story of Charlotte and Alexander lingers in your mind, perhaps you recognize something not just in their sorrow, but in their resilience. Perhaps your life too has known long winters, heavy silences, rooms that once echoed with memories now softened by time. But hear this, and let it settle deep within you. You are not a chapter that's ending. You are a library of survival, and your presence, your mere being, carries more meaning than you may ever fully know. You don't need to chase joy like you once did. At your age, joy knows where to find you. It comes in a memory that surprises you with warmth, in a familiar song on a quiet afternoon, in the way someone says your name, softly, reverently, as if touching history. Let the night embrace you now, not as someone growing old, but as someone who has grown whole. May sleep be deep, may peace be proud, and may you awaken tomorrow not to a world that's slipping away, but to one that is still, even now, reaching toward you with gentle hands. With our deepest gratitude and love.